When a poor working class man confronts the most powerful woman in town at her birthday party, the last thing he expects is to hear her whisper, "I wish I had met you sooner." But that confession, risky, full of longing, ignites a fire they both know could burn down everything they've built. In a small town where secrets are never kept and power doesn't forgive weakness, their love isn't just taboo, it's dangerous. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment the city you're viewing so I know how far my story has come. The gravel crunched under Ethan Cole's boots as he walked toward the sprawling estate perched on the hill overlooking Ridgemont. He shouldn't have come. He'd told himself that a dozen times on the drive over, white-knuckling the steering wheel of his beat-up truck while his daughter, Sophie, hummed in the back seat, oblivious to the tension coiled in his chest. But Sophie had been invited. And when your 8-year-old gets an invitation to the birthday party of the most powerful woman in town, a woman whose daughter happens to be in Sophie's class, you don't say no. Even if that woman is Victoria Hale. Even if the last time you saw her, things ended in a way that still made your jaw tight and your stomach turn. The party was already in full swing by the time they arrived. String lights hung between oak trees, casting warm light over clusters of well-dressed guests, who laughed too loud and held their wine glasses like shields. Ethan tugged at the collar of his button-down, the only one he owned that didn't have paint stains, and felt immediately out of place. "Dad, can I go find Maya?" Sophie asked, already bouncing on her toes. "Yes, stay where I can see you." She was gone before he finished the sentence, her dark ponytail swinging as she ran toward a group of kids near the fountain. Ethan exhaled and scanned the crowd, looking for an exit strategy. "Ethan Cole." The voice came from behind him, low, smooth, unmistakable. He turned slowly, and there she was. Victoria Hale looked exactly the same and nothing like he remembered. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than his mortgage, her blonde hair pulled back in a way that made her look older, sharper. But her eyes, those pale green eyes, still had that same intensity that used to unsettle him. "Victoria, I wasn't sure you'd come." Sophie was invited. "I know, I sent the invitation." That caught him off guard. He frowned. "Why?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at the guests milling around her property. When she looked back at him, something vulnerable flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. "Because I wanted you here." The words hung between them, too heavy for a casual birthday party. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, and he hated himself for it. "Victoria, I know." She cut him off softly. "I know. I'm not asking for anything. I wanted to see you." Before he could respond, a man in an expensive suit appeared at her elbow, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Victoria, the Hendersons are asking about the foundation initiative. You should—" "I'll be there in a moment, Richard." Her tone was polite but firm. The man, Richard, gave Ethan a once-over that was equal parts dismissive and territorial before walking away. "Friend of yours?" Ethan asked dryly. "Investor, and a pain in my ass." She sighed, then gestured toward the house. "There's food inside if you're hungry, or you can hide out here and drink overpriced wine. I won't judge." "I don't drink." "I remember." The way she said it, quiet, almost sad, made him look at her more closely. There were faint shadows under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there 10 years ago. "You okay?" he asked before he could stop himself. Victoria's smile was small and tired. "Ask me that again in a few hours." Then she was gone, pulled back into the crowd by another guest, and Ethan was left standing alone near the edge of the party, wondering what the hell he'd just walked into. The night dragged on. Ethan kept to the periphery, nursing a glass of soda and watching Sophie play with the other kids. He made small talk with a few parents he recognized from school drop-offs, dodged questions about his work, and tried not to stare at Victoria as she moved through the crowd like she was performing. Because that's what it was, a performance. He could see it in the way she laughed at jokes that weren't funny, the way her shoulders stayed just a little too straight, the way her hand tightened around her wine glass when Richard leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She hated this. "Mr. Cole?" He turned to find a girl standing beside him, maybe 11 or 12, with Victoria's eyes and a guarded expression that reminded him of Sophie when she was nervous. You must be Maya, he said. The girl nodded. My mom said you're fixing the guest house. Starting next week, yeah. Are you good at it? Fixing things? Ethan studied her for a moment, noting the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. I try to be. Why? Maya glanced back at the crowd, then lowered her voice. Because everything here is broken, and nobody wants to admit it. Before he could ask what she meant, Maya walked away, disappearing into the house. Ethan stared after her, unsettled. But the party finally started winding down around 9. Parents collected their kids, thanked Victoria with air kisses and promises to do lunch soon, and left in a parade of luxury cars. Ethan found Sophie asleep on a couch inside, her face smudged with frosting. She crashed hard, Victoria said, appearing beside him. She'd kicked off her heels at some point, and without them she looked smaller, more human. Long day, Ethan said. He scooped Sophie into his arms, careful not to wake her. Thanks for inviting her. Ethan, wait. He stopped at the door, Sophie's weight warm against his chest. Victoria stood a few feet away, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. I meant what I said earlier. I wanted you here, not just for the party. Victoria, I know it's complicated. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything after. She stopped, shook her head. I just need you to know that when I see you, I don't see the past. I see the one thing in my life that was ever real. Ethan's throat tightened. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because you're you and I'm me, and those things don't mix. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something clean and expensive. What if I wish they did? Wishing doesn't change anything. It did once. Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. I wish I had met you first. Before everything got so tangled. Before I became this. She gestured at the empty party, the house, the life she'd built. I wish I could go back and choose differently. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the cracks beneath the polish, the exhaustion, the loneliness. I have to go, he said quietly. Victoria nodded, stepping back. I know. He made it halfway to his truck before he stopped, still holding Sophie, still trying to breathe normally. When he looked back, Victoria was standing in the doorway, backlit by the glow of her house, watching him leave. And for a moment, just a moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like to stay. The guest house project started the following Monday. Ethan arrived early, toolbox in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other, and found Victoria already waiting. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep. She handed him a key. Everything you need should be inside. If you're missing materials, let me know. Will do. She lingered like she wanted to say something else, but a black sedan pulled up the driveway and Richard stepped out, his expression all business. Victoria, we need to talk about the quarterly projections. Later, Richard. It's urgent. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. Give me 10 minutes. Richard's gaze flicked to Ethan, dismissive and cold, before he got back in the car. Victoria sighed. Sorry, he's your problem, not mine, Ethan said, more sharply than he meant to. He softened his tone. Go handle your business. I'll be here. She nodded and walked away, but not before he saw the frustration flicker across her face. The guest house was a mess. Water damage in the bathroom, rotting floorboards in the kitchen, electrical work that looked like it had been done by someone with a death wish. Ethan spent the first few days gutting the place, hauling debris to the dumpster he'd rented and making lists of everything that needed replacing. Victoria stopped by every afternoon, usually with coffee and questions about the progress. At first, the visits were brief, professional, but by the end of the first week, she started staying longer, leaning against the doorframe and watching him work. You don't have to babysit me, Ethan said one afternoon, prying up another ruined floorboard. I'm not babysitting, I'm supervising. That's the same thing. It's really not. He glanced up at her, saw the small smile tugging at her mouth, and shook his head. Don't you have a billion-dollar empire to run? I do, but it's boring. She crossed her arms. This is more interesting. Watching me demo a floor? Watching you work. You're good at it. Ethan sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's just carpentry, Victoria. It's more than that. You care about it. I can tell. There was something in her voice, admiration, maybe, or envy, that made him uncomfortable. He went back to work, trying to ignore the way her presence filled the room. Can I ask you something? She said after a long silence. Depends on the question. Why did you come back to Ridgemont, after everything? Ethan's hand stilled on the crowbar. He didn't look at her. Sophie needed stability, and this place, it's home, even if it doesn't always feel like it. Do you regret it? Coming back? Staying? He thought about that, really thought about it. Some days, yeah, but Sophie's happy. That's what matters. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. You're a good father, Ethan. I try. No, you are. She pushed off the door frame. I should let you work. But she didn't leave. Instead, she stood there, looking at him like she was trying to memorize something, and Ethan felt the air between them shift. Victoria, I know, she said quickly. I know I shouldn't be here. I know this is a bad idea, but I can't. She stopped, shook her head. I can't stop thinking about what I said at the party, about wishing I'd met you first. Ethan stood slowly, setting the crowbar down. That's not fair. I know. You can't just... I know. Her eyes were bright, desperate. But it's the truth, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. For a long moment, they just stood there, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. Ethan wanted to tell her to leave. He wanted to tell her she was right. He wanted to close the distance between them and damn the consequences. Instead, he said, You should go. Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. Okay. She turned and walked out, and Ethan listened to the sound of her footsteps fading before he let himself exhale. The storm hit 3 days later. It started as a low rumble of thunder in the distance, the kind Ethan had learned to recognize from years working outdoors. He'd planned to wrap up early, but the guest house was finally starting to take shape, and he wanted to finish installing the new subfloor before calling it a day. By the time the first drops started falling, it was too late. The rain came down in sheets, wind howling through the gaps in the walls. Ethan cursed, scrambling to cover his tools and protect the work he'd done. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Damn it! He fumbled for his phone using the flashlight to navigate toward the door, and nearly ran into Victoria. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, breathing hard. What are you doing here? He shouted over the storm. The main house lost power. I came to check. A crack of lightning split the sky, close enough to make them both flinch. We need to get inside. This place isn't safe. The roof... Another gust of wind tore through, and something overhead groaned ominously. Ethan grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her toward the corner of the room, away from the windows. Stay down! They huddled together as the storm raged, the guest house shaking like it might come apart. Victoria's shoulder pressed against his, her breathing ragged, and Ethan could feel her trembling. Whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. It's okay, he said, more to himself than to her. It'll pass. How do you know? Because it always does. The storm lasted another 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the wind finally died down and the rain eased to a drizzle, Ethan let himself relax. You okay? He asked. Victoria nodded, pulling back slightly. Her mascara was smudged, her dress torn at the shoulder, and she looked more real than he'd ever seen her. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not letting me go through that alone. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Instead, he stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and for a moment, just a moment, neither of them let go. They walked back to the main house together, picking their way through fallen branches and debris. The power was still out, and Victoria led him inside with a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. I should check on Maya, she said. I'll wait here. But when she came back down, her expression was tight. She's not answering her door. Ethan frowned. Maybe she's asleep. No, she always answers, even when she's upset. Victoria's hand shook as she set the flashlight down. Something's wrong. Okay, let's check. They went upstairs together and Ethan knocked on Maya's door. Maya, it's Ethan. Your mom's worried. Can you open up? Silence. Victoria's breathing quickened. Maya, please. The door opened a crack and Maya's face appeared, pale and red-eyed. I'm fine. You don't look fine, Victoria said, pushing past Ethan. What happened? Nothing, just leave me alone. But Victoria was already inside and Ethan saw her stop short, staring at something on the floor. He stepped closer and saw it. A shattered picture frame, glass scattered across the carpet. Maya, I said I'm fine. Maya's voice cracked. Why do you even care? You're never here anyway. Victoria recoiled like she'd been struck. That's not fair. Isn't it? Maya's eyes were blazing now. You're always working, always meeting with Richard, always pretending like everything's perfect when it's not. Maya, I heard you. The words came out in a rush, raw and furious. I heard you at the party, talking to him, telling him you wished you'd met him first. Ethan's stomach dropped. Victoria went very still. You don't understand. I understand that you don't want to be here, that you'd rather be somewhere else, with someone else. Maya's voice broke. I understand that I'm not enough. That's not true. Victoria's voice was shaking now. Maya, that's not... But Maya turned away, curling in on herself, and Victoria stood frozen, her hands useless at her sides. Ethan stepped forward carefully. Maya, can I tell you something? The girl didn't respond, but she didn't tell him to leave either. When my wife left, I thought it was because I wasn't enough. I thought if I'd been better, stronger, more successful, she would have stayed. He paused. But I was wrong. Sometimes people leave because they're scared, not because you're not enough, because they don't know how to stay. Maya turned slightly, just enough to look at him. Your mom's scared, Ethan continued. I can see it, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means she's human, and humans mess up. Victoria made a small choked sound. When Ethan glanced at her, tears were streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered to Maya. I'm so sorry. You're right. I haven't been here. I've been so focused on keeping everything together that I forgot what I was keeping it together for. Maya hesitated, then slowly walked over and wrapped her arms around her mother. Victoria held her tight, her shoulders shaking. Ethan slipped out of the room quietly, giving them space. Oh. He found Victoria downstairs an hour later, sitting on the floor of the darkened living room with her back against the couch. The flashlight sat on the coffee table, casting long shadows. She asleep? Ethan asked. Victoria nodded. Finally, he sat down beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder. They didn't say anything for a long time. I'm a terrible mother, Victoria said eventually. You're not. I am. I've been so focused on the company, on Richard, on keeping up appearances. Her voice cracked. I didn't even realize how much I was failing her. You're not failing her. You're just trying to survive. Victoria laughed bitterly. Is that what this is? Surviving? Isn't it? She turned to look at him, her eyes red and raw. I don't know anymore. I don't know what I'm doing, Ethan. I don't know why I keep letting Richard control everything. I don't know why I can't just... She stopped, shook her head. I don't know why I can't be honest. About what? About the fact that I hate my life. The words came out in a rush, desperate. I hate the business. I hate the people I work with. I hate pretending to be this perfect, untouchable version of myself when all I want is... She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. Then stop pretending, he said quietly. Victoria's fingers tightened around his. It's not that simple. It never is. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped in the darkness, and Ethan felt the world narrow to just the two of them, two people who'd been running from the same thing for 10 years. I meant it, you know, Victoria said softly. What I said at the party. I do wish I'd met you first. Why? Because you make me feel like I'm not alone, even when I probably should be. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so instead, he shifted closer and Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. This is a bad idea, she whispered. I know. We shouldn't... I know. But neither of them moved. Then, the power came back on just before midnight, the lights flickering to life and shattering the quiet. Victoria pulled away, suddenly self-conscious, and Ethan let her go. I should check the guest house, he said, standing. Make sure nothing got damaged. Ethan. He stopped, looked back at her. Thank you, she said. For staying. He nodded, then left before he could do something stupid. Outside the air was cool and clean, the storm already a memory. Ethan walked back to the guest house, his mind spinning. This was a bad idea. He knew that. Victoria was right. They shouldn't. But when he thought about the way she'd looked at him, the way her hand had felt in his, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. The guest house was mostly intact, aside from a few leaks and some scattered debris. Ethan spent the next hour cleaning up, trying to focus on the work, and not on the woman sitting alone in the big house on the hill. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking over Ridgemont, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ethan stood in the doorway of the guest house, watching the light spread across Victoria's property, and wondered what the hell he was getting himself into. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for tonight. For everything. He stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Anytime. And he meant it. The following week passed in a blur. Ethan worked on the guest house during the day, and Victoria stopped by less frequently, though when she did, the air between them felt charged, fragile. Richard's presence became more oppressive. Ethan would see him on the property, always hovering near Victoria, always watching with that same calculating expression. Once, Ethan caught the tail end of an argument between them near the driveway. You're making a mistake, Richard was saying, his voice low and sharp. It's my company, Richard. My decision. And my money keeping it afloat. Don't forget that. Victoria's face went pale, but she didn't back down. I haven't forgotten. Richard noticed Ethan watching and straightened, smoothing his tie. We'll finish this later. When he was gone, Victoria stood there for a moment, hands clenched at her sides. Ethan walked over slowly. You okay? She let out a shaky breath. Define okay. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. She looked at him, and something in her expression softened. But I appreciate you asking. They stood there in the quiet morning, the world around them oblivious, and Ethan realized something he'd been trying not to admit. He was falling for her. Again. Still. Maybe he'd never stopped, and judging by the way Victoria was looking at him, like he was the only solid thing in her crumbling world, she felt the same. This is going to end badly, he said quietly. Victoria's smile was sad. Probably. We should stop before it gets worse. We should. Neither of them moved, and in that moment, Ethan knew, no matter what came next, no matter how hard they tried to fight it, they were already too far gone. The guest house took shape slowly over the next 2 weeks, and with it something neither Ethan nor Victoria had intended. A rhythm. She'd bring coffee in the morning, sometimes staying to watch him work, other times disappearing into her office for hours. He'd find excuses to check in with her about materials or measurements, when really he just wanted to see if she was okay. It was dangerous, this thing growing between them. They both knew it, but knowing didn't seem to stop it. On a Wednesday afternoon, Ethan was installing new cabinets in the guest house kitchen when he heard the crunch of gravel outside. He looked up to see Victoria's car pulling into the drive, followed by Richard's black sedan. His jaw tightened. Victoria got out first, her movements sharp and agitated. Richard followed, his expression cold. This conversation isn't over, Richard called after her. Yes, it is. Victoria didn't even turn around. You're making an emotional decision, Victoria. That's not like you. She stopped then, spun on her heel. You don't know what's like me, Richard. You know the version of me that does what you want. That's not the same thing. Richard's smile was thin, patronizing. I'm trying to protect you. The charity gala is in 3 weeks. If you don't have the donation secured by then, I'll figure it out. With what? Hope? He stepped closer, lowering his voice, but Ethan could still hear him. You need me, Victoria. Don't forget that. Victoria's hands clenched at her sides. And for a moment, Ethan thought she might actually hit him. Instead, she said, very quietly, Get off my property. Richard's expression darkened. He glanced toward the guest house, saw Ethan watching, and his mouth curved into something ugly. I see. Is that what this is about? The contractor? He laughed, sharp and mean. You're risking everything for... Leave. Now. Richard held her gaze for another long moment, then turned and walked back to his car. He didn't peel out. That would have been too undignified. But the way he drove off made his anger clear. Victoria stood there, breathing hard, until the sound of his engine faded. Then she walked straight to the guest house. Ethan met her at the door. You okay? No? She pushed past him, pacing the length of the unfinished kitchen. No, I'm really not. What did he want? Control. Same thing he always wants. She stopped, pressed her palms against the new countertop. He's been my primary investor for 5 years. He's the reason the company survived the recession, and he won't let me forget it. So fire him, Victoria laughed bitterly. It's not that simple. If I cut him out, he'll pull his funding, and if he does that before the gala, the whole foundation collapses. Everything I've built, gone. That's not legal, is it? He can't just... He can. I was desperate when I took his money, and I didn't read the fine print carefully enough. There are clauses. Exit penalties. He structured it so I can't afford to get rid of him. She looked at Ethan, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm trapped. Ethan set down his tools and crossed the room to her. Then we find a way to untrap you. We? You think I'm going to just stand here and watch him bully you? Victoria's laugh was watery. You don't owe me anything, Ethan. Maybe not, but I'm here anyway. She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression cracked. Before he could react, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was desperate, fierce, like she was trying to prove something, to him or to herself, he wasn't sure. Ethan's brain screamed at him to stop, to push her away, to remember all the reasons this was a bad idea. But his hands were already on her waist, pulling her closer, and he was kissing her back like he'd been waiting 10 years to do it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria pressed her forehead against his chest. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have... Don't. Ethan's voice was rough. Don't apologize. This is a mess. Yeah, it is. She pulled back just enough to look at him. So what do we do? Ethan wanted to tell her they should stop. That this, whatever this was, would only make things worse. But when he looked at her, standing in the half-finished kitchen with her lipstick smudged and her guard completely down, he couldn't lie. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'm not walking away. Victoria's smile was small and sad. You should. Probably. She kissed him again, softer this time, and Ethan let himself have it, just for a moment, before reality came crashing back. The sound of a car door slamming made them both freeze. Victoria pulled away quickly, smoothing her hair, and Ethan turned to see Maya standing by the driveway, staring at them through the open door of the guest house. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Maya, Victoria started, but Maya was already gone, running toward the main house. Damn it! Victoria started after her, then stopped, looking back at Ethan. I have to... Go. I'll be here. She nodded and ran after her daughter, leaving Ethan alone in the quiet of the guest house, his heart pounding and his mind racing. That was it. They were done hiding, and he had no idea what came next. Victoria didn't come back that day, or the next. Ethan kept working, trying to focus on finishing the cabinets, the trim, the final details that would bring the guest house together. But his mind kept drifting to Victoria, to Maya, to the look on the girl's face when she'd seen them. On Friday, his phone buzzed with a text. Can we talk? Tonight? After Maya's asleep? Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yeah. Where? Guest house. 10 p.m. He showed up early, anxiety gnawing at his gut. The guest house was nearly finished now, just paint and a few fixtures left. It looked good. Better than good. But all Ethan could think about was what Victoria was going to say. She arrived exactly at 10, wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, her hair pulled back. No makeup, no armor. Hey, she said quietly. Hey. They stood there awkwardly for a moment before Victoria spoke again. Maya won't talk to me. She locked herself in her room and won't come out. Her voice was tight. She thinks... What does she think? That I'm lying to her, that I'm choosing you over her. Victoria's hands twisted together. And maybe she's right. Victoria. No, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I've spent the last 2 days trying to figure out what to say to her, how to explain this, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be honest with her about what I want without making her feel like she's not enough. Ethan stepped closer. What do you want? Victoria looked at him, and her eyes were raw. You. I want you. And I hate myself for it because it's selfish and reckless and it's going to hurt people I love, but I can't stop wanting it. The words hung between them, too big for the small space. This is going to blow up, Ethan said quietly. You know that, right? Your reputation, the business, this town. People are going to talk, and they're not going to be kind. I know. Richard's going to use it against you. I know. And Maya say, I know. Victoria's voice broke. I know all of it, Ethan, and I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life pretending I don't feel this. Ethan closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. Then we do this right. We don't hide. We don't sneak around. We face it head on. Even if it costs me everything. Even then. Victoria kissed him, and this time there was no desperation, just certainty. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. I need to talk to Maya first, she said, before this goes any further. She deserves to hear it from me. Okay. And I need to deal with Richard. If I'm going to do this, I can't have him holding the company over my head. How are you going to I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. She pulled back, managed a small smile. I'm good at solving impossible problems. It's kind of my thing. Ethan kissed her forehead. I believe you. The weekend passed in tense silence. Ethan didn't hear from Victoria, and he forced himself not to reach out. She needed space to deal with her daughter, and he needed to figure out what the hell he was doing. Sophie noticed his distraction on Sunday morning while they were making pancakes. Dad, you're burning them. Ethan blinked, looked down at the blackened mess in the pan, and cursed under his breath. Sorry, kiddo. Are you okay? Yeah, just tired. Sophie studied him with the unnerving perception of an 8-year-old. Is it because of Maya's mom? Ethan nearly dropped the spatula. What? Maya said her mom's been sad, and you've been working at her house a lot, so I thought maybe… Sophie. Ethan crouched down to her level. Did Maya say anything else? Sophie shrugged. Just that her mom's fighting with some guy named Richard, and that everything's weird. Ethan's chest tightened. Yeah, things are a little complicated right now. Do you like her? Maya's mom? The question caught him off guard. Ethan looked at his daughter, this smart, observant kid who deserved honesty, and decided not to lie. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Sophie considered this. Does she like you back? I think so. Then why are you sad? Because it's complicated, Soph. Sometimes liking someone isn't enough. Sophie frowned. That's dumb. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Yeah, it kind of is. Monday morning, Ethan arrived at the estate to find Victoria's car already in the driveway, along with 3 others he didn't recognize. He could hear raised voices coming from the main house. He hesitated, then headed toward the guest house. Whatever was happening, it wasn't his business. But 10 minutes later, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her hands shaking. I need your help. Ethan set down his paintbrush. What happened? Richard showed up with his lawyers. He's threatening to pull his funding unless I sign over partial ownership of the company. Her voice was barely steady. He's saying I've been mismanaging funds, making reckless decisions. He's going to destroy me, Ethan. Can he do that? I don't know. Maybe. The contracts are complicated, and She stopped, pressed her palms against her eyes. I don't know what to do. Ethan crossed the room, took her hands in his. Okay, let's think this through. What does he actually have on you? Nothing concrete, just insinuations. But if he starts digging, if he makes this public before the gala, then we don't let him. How? Ethan thought fast. Who else knows about the contracts? Is there anyone who can verify what he's claiming? Victoria hesitated. My attorney. But she's in New York, and I don't think she can get here before. Call her now. Get her on the phone and have her review everything Richard's saying. If he's bluffing, we call him on it. And if he's not, then we find another investor, someone who can buy him out. Victoria shook her head. There's no time. The gala's in 2 weeks, and I need the funds secured before then, or the foundation. Then we make time. Ethan squeezed her hands. You're not doing this alone, Victoria. Not anymore. She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd walked in, some of the fear left her eyes. Okay, I'll call Sarah. While Victoria made the call, Ethan paced the guest house, his mind working through options. He didn't know anything about corporate law or high-stakes negotiations, but he knew people, and he knew bullies. Richard was betting on Victoria being too scared to fight back, which meant the best move was to do exactly what he didn't expect. When Victoria hung up, she looked a little steadier. Sarah says the contract has a clause that allows me to buy him out if I can match his initial investment plus 20%, but that's... She did the math in her head, and her face fell. That's almost $3 million. I don't have that kind of liquid capital. Ethan's stomach sank. What if you sold something? Assets, property? It would take months, and Richard knows that. She sank into a chair, defeated. He's got me cornered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan had an idea, risky, probably stupid, but it was something. What if you went public with it? Victoria looked up sharply. What? Richard's counting on you keeping this quiet, right? Because if people knew he was trying to force you out of your own company, it would make him look bad. So what if you didn't keep it quiet? What if you told people exactly what he's doing? Ethan, I can't. Why not? You've got the gala coming up. Influential people, press, donors. What if you use that platform to expose him? Victoria stared at him. That's insane. Maybe, but it might work. Or it might destroy everything I've built. He's already trying to do that. Ethan crouched in front of her. At least this way, you're the one controlling the narrative. Victoria was quiet for a long time, her mind clearly racing. Finally, she looked at him. If I do this, there's no going back. Richard will come after me with everything he has. And anyone connected to me... She stopped, her meaning clear. I know, Ethan said. I'm not going anywhere. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You might regret that. Let me worry about that. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, and Ethan held her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. The next week was chaos. Victoria worked around the clock with her attorney to build a case against Richard, documenting every conversation, every contract clause, every shady move he'd made over the past 5 years. Ethan helped where he could, organizing files, making calls, keeping her fed and caffeinated when she forgot to take care of herself. Maya remained a ghost in the house, barely speaking to her mother and avoiding Ethan entirely. The tension was unbearable, and Ethan could see it wearing on Victoria. She hates me, Victoria said one night, slumped over her laptop in the guest house. It was past midnight, and she looked exhausted. She doesn't hate you. She's scared. Same thing. Ethan pulled up a chair beside her. Talk to her. I've tried. She won't listen. Then make her listen. Tell her the truth. All of it. Victoria looked at him, uncertain. What if she can't handle it? She's tougher than you think, and she deserves to know who you really are, not the perfect version you've been trying to be. Victoria closed her laptop slowly. What if who I really am isn't enough? It will be. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Okay, tomorrow. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Oh, the conversation didn't go well. Ethan wasn't there. Victoria had asked him to stay away, but she told him about it later, her voice flat and hollow. I tried to explain about Richard, about the company, about you, and she just... Victoria's hands shook around her coffee cup. She told me I was a liar, that I'd been lying to her for years about everything, that I cared more about my image than about her. Victoria, she's right. The words came out broken. I have been lying. To her, to myself. I've been so focused on building this perfect life that I forgot to actually live it. Ethan took the coffee cup from her hands and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms. She didn't cry. She was too exhausted for that. But she leaned into him like he was the only thing holding her up. What do I do? She whispered. You keep trying. You show her you're serious about changing, and you give her time. What if time isn't enough? Then you keep trying anyway. Victoria pulled back, looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Why are you still here after everything? Because I love you. The words were out before he could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. Victoria stared at him, her breath catching. I love you, Ethan said again, steadier this time. I probably never stopped. And I know this is a mess, and I know we're both scared, but I'm done pretending I don't feel it. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I have for a long time, Her voice broke. I didn't think I deserved to say it. Ethan kissed her, slow and careful, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. We're going to get through this, he said against her lips. Together. Victoria nodded, and for the first time in weeks, she looked like she believed it. The gala was 5 days away when everything fell apart. Ethan was finishing the final touches on the guest house, installing light fixtures, touching up paint, when his phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Hey, I'm almost done here. He knows. Her voice was sharp with panic. Richard knows. About us. Ethan's stomach dropped. How? I don't know. Someone must have seen us, or Maya said something, or... She took a shaky breath. He just called. He said if I don't sign over the company by Friday, he's going to the press with proof that I've been having an affair with my contractor. He's going to paint me as reckless, unstable. He'll destroy my reputation. Let him. We already decided. That was before he had leverage. Victoria's voice cracked. If this gets out before the gala, the donors will pull out. The foundation will collapse. Everything I've worked for, Victoria, listen to me. I can't lose everything, Ethan. I can't. There was a long silence. Then Ethan said, very quietly, What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we need to stop, just for now. Until after the gala. If we can get through that, if I can secure the donations and buy Richard out, then maybe... No. Ethan, no. His voice was firm. We're not doing this. We're not giving him that power. You don't understand. If this gets out, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt you. Your business, your reputation, Sophie, I don't care. Well, I do. Victoria's voice rose, desperate. I care about you too much to let you go down with me. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath him. So that's it? You're just going to push me away? Just until this is over, please, Ethan. I need to know you're safe. I don't want to be safe. I want to be with you. I know. Her voice broke. But I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. I won't. The line went quiet. Ethan stood there in the half-finished guest house, his chest tight, and realized she'd already made up her mind. Okay, he said finally, if that's what you want. It's not what I want, it's what has to happen. Right. Ethan, I'll finish the guest house by the end of the week. After that, I'm done. He hung up before she could respond, and for a long time he just stood there, staring at the walls he'd rebuilt, wondering how something that felt so right could go so wrong. Just that. The next 3 days were hell. Ethan threw himself into finishing the guest house, working late into the night to avoid thinking about Victoria. He didn't see her. She stayed in the main house, and the only signs of her presence were the lights burning in her office window long past midnight. On Thursday afternoon, Maya found him in the guest house. Can I talk to you? She asked, hovering in the doorway. Ethan set down his hammer. Sure. Maya stepped inside, looking around at the finished space. It looks good. Thanks. She was quiet for a moment, then said, My mom told me. About Richard. About what he's doing. Yeah. She also told me about you, about how you've been helping her. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. I was mad at her, Maya continued. When I saw you guys together, I thought she was just... She stopped, shook her head. But she's not, is she? She really cares about you. I think so, yeah. Do you care about her? Ethan looked at this kid, this brave, hurt kid who deserved honesty, and nodded. Yeah, I do. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Then why are you leaving? Because your mom thinks it's what's best. But it's not. Maya's voice rose. She's miserable. She's been crying every night, and she won't eat, and she keeps looking at her phone like she's waiting for you to call." Ethan's chest tightened. Maya. I was wrong about her. About what I said. She's not choosing you over me. She's just... Maya's voice cracked. She's just trying to be happy, and I ruined it. You didn't ruin anything. Yes, I did. I made her think she had to choose, but she doesn't, because I... Maya wiped at her eyes. I don't want her to be alone anymore, even if it's scary, even if people talk. Ethan crouched down to her level. You should tell her that. I did, but I think she needs to hear it from you too. Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Tomorrow night. Gala. She needs you there. Don't let Richard win. Sarah, Victoria's attorney. Ethan stared at the message, then looked at Maya. What do you think? He asked. Should I go? Maya nodded, fierce and certain. Yeah, and you should tell Richard to go to hell. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. You're your mother's daughter, you know that? For the first time in days, Maya smiled. Well, The gala was being held at the estate. A massive white tent set up on the back lawn, filled with round tables, string lights, and enough flowers to stock a florist. Ethan had never seen anything like it. He showed up in the only suit he owned, feeling wildly out of place among the tuxedos and designer gowns. But he wasn't here to fit in. He was here for Victoria. He found her near the back of the tent, surrounded by donors and board members, smiling that practiced smile he'd learned to see through. She looked beautiful, a deep blue dress that made her eyes impossibly bright, but tired. So tired. When she saw him, she froze. Ethan made his way through the crowd, ignoring the curious stares until he was standing in front of her. Ethan, what are you... I'm not letting you do this alone. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You shouldn't be here. If Richard sees you, let him. I'm done hiding. Before she could respond, Richard appeared at her elbow, his expression cold. Mr. Cole, what a surprise. Ethan met his gaze evenly. Richard, I wasn't aware you'd been invited. I invited myself. Richard's smile was thin, dangerous. Victoria, may I have a word, privately? No, Victoria said quietly. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. Richard's expression darkened. Fine. Sign the papers, or I go public. Tonight. Your choice. The guests nearby had started to notice the tension, conversations trailing off. Ethan could feel the weight of their attention. Victoria took a shaky breath and Ethan saw her hands tremble. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. No. Richard blinked. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not signing anything. And if you want to go public, go ahead. Tell everyone about my personal life. Tell them I'm involved with my contractor. Tell them whatever you want. She stepped closer, her voice rising. But while you're at it, I'll tell them the truth about how you've been manipulating me for years, about the contract clauses you buried, about how you've been threatening to destroy me if I don't hand over my company. The tent had gone completely silent. Richard's face went white, then red. You have no proofs. Actually, she does. Everyone turned to see a woman in a sharp suit stepping forward. Victoria's attorney, Sarah. She held up a folder. Emails, recorded conversations, contract amendments, all documented. Sarah's smile was razor sharp. You really should have been more careful, Richard. Richard's mouth opened and closed. For the first time since Ethan had met him, he looked genuinely rattled. You can't... Oh, I can. Victoria's voice was clear now, powerful. And I am. You're done, Richard. I'm buying you out. And if you try to fight me, I'll make sure everyone in this tent knows exactly what kind of man you are. The crowd erupted in whispers. Richard looked around, saw the judgment in their faces, and his expression turned ugly. You'll regret this, he hissed. Maybe, but at least I'll be free. Richard stared at her for another long moment, then turned and walked out of the tent. The silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Then someone started clapping. It was an older woman Ethan didn't recognize, one of the board members. Then another person joined in, and another, until the entire tent was applauding, and Victoria stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking more real than Ethan had ever seen her. She turned to him, and he crossed the space between them, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered. Victoria laughed, watery and disbelieving. "We did it." And for the first time in weeks, Ethan let himself believe they might actually make it. The applause had barely faded when Victoria's phone started buzzing. She pulled back from Ethan, wiping her eyes, and glanced at the screen. Her expression shifted from relief to confusion. "It's the Foundation's bank," she said quietly. "They're calling at 9:30 on a Friday night." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Answer it." Victoria stepped away from the crowd, pressing the phone to her ear. Ethan watched her face go pale, watched her grip the phone tighter, watched her mouth form words he couldn't hear over the resumed chatter of the guests. When she came back, she looked sick. "What happened?" Ethan asked. "Richard moved the money. All of it." Her voice was barely steady. "The Foundation accounts. He had co-signing authority from when we first set it up. He transferred everything to an offshore holding account an hour ago." "Can he do that?" "Apparently, yes. The bank says the paperwork was legitimate." Victoria's hand shook as she lowered the phone. "Without that money, the Foundation can't operate. The programs we fund, the shelters, the scholarships, everything shuts down." Sarah appeared at Victoria's side, her expression grim. "I just got off the phone with my office. Richard's claiming the funds were investor capital, not charitable donations. He's saying he has the right to reclaim them if the partnership dissolves." "But that's insane," Ethan said. "He can't just—" "He can if the contracts support it," Sarah interrupted. "And I'm betting he structured them specifically for this scenario." Victoria pressed her palm against her forehead. "So even though I exposed him, even though everyone saw what he did, he still wins." The reality of it settled over them like ash. Around the tent, donors were beginning to notice something was wrong. The energy that had felt so triumphant moments ago was starting to curdle into uncertainty. "What do we do?" Victoria asked, looking at Sarah. "File an injunction, Monday morning. Try to freeze the accounts before he can move the money again." "Monday's too late. By then he'll have it buried in so many shell companies we'll never recover it." Victoria's voice cracked. "He planned this. He knew exactly what I was going to do, and he planned for it." Ethan watched her spiraling, saw the hope draining from her face, and felt rage building in his chest. This was what Richard did. He crushed people. Not with fists or shouting, but with paperwork and legal loopholes and money moved in the dark. "There has to be something we can do," Ethan said. "There isn't." Victoria's voice was flat now, defeated. "He won. I stood up to him and he destroyed me anyway." Before Ethan could respond, one of the board members approached, an older man with kind eyes and an expensive watch. "Victoria, dear, is everything all right? You look distressed." Victoria forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, Mr. Harrison. Just a minor accounting issue, nothing to worry about." Harrison studied her for a moment, clearly not convinced, but nodded politely. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. Wonderful event, by the way. Your mother would be proud." He walked away and Victoria's composure crumbled. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't stand here and pretend everything's fine when it's falling apart." "Then don't," Ethan said. "Tell them the truth." "What truth? That I was so naive I let Richard steal millions of dollars? That I destroyed the foundation my mother built because I couldn't keep my personal life separate from my business?" She laughed bitterly. "That'll really inspire confidence. Victoria, I need to get out of here. I need to—" She looked around the tent, at all the people watching her, and Ethan could see the panic setting in. "I need air." She walked quickly toward the house, and Ethan followed, leaving Sarah to manage the curious stares. They made it to Victoria's office before she finally broke, sinking into her chair with her head in her hands. "I lost," she said. "I lost everything." Ethan crouched in front of her. "You didn't lose. You're still here. The foundation's still here. We can rebuild. With what money? Richard took it all. And even if we could recover it, the damage is done. The donors saw me fall apart. They saw me make this personal. No one's going to trust me with their money after this. Then we find new donors. We start smaller. Stop." Victoria looked at him, and her eyes were empty. "Just stop, Ethan. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need you to stop pretending this is fixable." The words stung more than they should have. Ethan stood slowly, putting distance between them. So what, you're just giving up? I'm being realistic. You're being scared. Victoria's expression hardened. Don't do that. Don't make this about courage. I stood up to Richard tonight. I exposed him in front of everyone. And it didn't matter. He still won. Because he cheated. That doesn't mean you lost. It doesn't mean I won either. She rubbed her face tiredly. Maybe this is just how it ends. Maybe some people are meant to have power, and some people are meant to be crushed by it. Ethan stared at her, recognizing the despair in her voice because he'd felt it himself. After his wife left, after the divorce, after every job that fell through and every month he'd scrambled to make rent, but he'd had Sophie to fight for. Victoria had Maya, had the foundation, had a purpose bigger than her fear. You don't believe that, he said quietly. Right now, I don't know what I believe. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Maya stood in the doorway, still in her dress from earlier, looking small and uncertain. Mom, people are asking for you. Victoria took a shaky breath, composing herself with visible effort. Tell them I'll be right there. Maya didn't move. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. You're lying. The bluntness of it made Victoria flinch. Maya stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. I heard what happened, about Richard taking the money. Maya's voice was steady, older than her years. Are we going to lose the house? What? No, Maya, no. This is the foundation's money, not ours. We're going to be fine. But the foundation won't be. Victoria's silence was answer enough. Maya looked at Ethan, then back at her mother. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Are you going to fight? Maya, it's not that simple. Yes, it is. Maya's voice rose. You told me that when things get hard, we don't give up. You told me that when I wanted to quit piano, when I wanted to quit soccer. You said the Hale women don't quit. This is different. Why? Because you're embarrassed? Because people are going to talk? Maya crossed her arms. I thought you didn't care about that anymore. I thought that's why you stood up to Richard, because you were done pretending. Victoria stared at her daughter, and Ethan saw the moment the words hit. Maya was right, and they both knew it. I'm scared, Victoria admitted quietly. So? You're always telling me being scared doesn't mean you stop trying. When did you get so smart? I learned from you. Maya's expression softened. But you have to actually do the things you tell me to do. Otherwise, it's just words. Victoria let out a shaky laugh, pulling Maya into a hug. You're right. You're absolutely right. When she pulled back, there was something different in her face. Not hope exactly, but determination. She looked at Ethan. Okay, we fight. I don't know how yet, but we figure it out. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Okay. But first I need to go back out there and face those people. I need to tell them the truth about what happened and give them a reason to believe we can fix it. Can you do that? Maya asked. Victoria took a deep breath. I guess we're about to find out. They walked back to the tent together, Victoria, Maya, and Ethan, and the conversations died down as Victoria stepped to the small stage where the evening speeches were supposed to happen. Someone handed her a microphone, and for a moment she just stood there, gathering herself. I need to tell you all something, she began, her voice carrying across the tent. And I need to be honest about it, because I've spent too long hiding the truth. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Ethan could see Richard's allies in the crowd, smirking like they knew what was coming. An hour ago, my former investor, Richard Kensington, transferred all of the foundation's operating funds to an offshore account. As far as we can tell, it was legal. The contracts we signed years ago gave him that authority, and I was too desperate at the time to read the fine print. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, I knew it. Victoria's hands tightened on the microphone, but she kept going. Which means that as of tonight, the Hale Foundation is essentially bankrupt. The programs we fund, the domestic violence shelters, the scholarship funds, the community outreach, all of it stops unless we can find a way to replace that money. The murmuring grew louder. Ethan saw people pulling out their phones, already texting, already spreading the news. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know. You trusted this foundation with your donations, and I failed to protect them. That's on me. Not on Richard, not on anyone else. Me. Victoria's voice cracked, but she pushed through. But I'm also telling you because I'm not giving up. I don't know how we're going to fix this. I don't have a plan. But I know that the work this foundation does matters too much to let one vindictive man destroy it. She paused, scanning the crowd. So I'm asking for your help. Not your money? Not yet. Just your patience. Give me 30 days to figure this out, to find a way to recover what was stolen or replace it. And if I can't, she swallowed hard. If I can't, then I'll step down and hand the foundation over to someone who can do better. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan watched the faces in the crowd, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some openly hostile. Then Mr. Harrison stood up. I'll give you 45, he said. Victoria blinked. What? 45 days. That's what you'll need to untangle Richard's mess and build something sustainable. Harrison looked around the tent. And I'll pledge $500,000 to the recovery fund, effective immediately. Another woman stood, someone Ethan recognized from the society pages. I'll match that. Then another donor. And another. Within minutes, pledges were flying around the tent, totaling well over $2 million. Victoria stood on the stage, tears streaming down her face, as the people she thought would abandon her instead chose to fight alongside her. When the pledges finally slowed, Sarah stepped up beside Victoria. We'll set up a separate account, completely transparent, every dollar tracked, every expense documented, and we'll file that injunction Monday morning. She looked at Richard's empty seat pointedly. Mr. Kensington might have won the battle, but he hasn't won the war. The tent erupted in applause, and this time Victoria didn't try to hold back her tears. She found Ethan in the crowd, and the look on her face was something he'd remember for the rest of his life. Gratitude, disbelief, and underneath it all, hope. When the event finally wound down and the last guests trickled out, Ethan found Victoria sitting on the back steps of the house, shoes kicked off, looking exhausted, but lighter somehow. You did it, he said, sitting beside her. We did it. I couldn't have... She stopped, shook her head. If you hadn't been here, I would have given up. No, you wouldn't have. Maya wouldn't have let you. Victoria laughed softly. She's tougher than I am. She gets that from you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the catering crew break down the tent. Then Victoria said, What happens now? What do you mean? With us. We've been so focused on surviving Richard that we haven't talked about what comes after. Ethan considered that. I guess we figure it out as we go. That's not much of a plan. No, but it's honest. He looked at her. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. Whatever happens with the foundation, with the money, with this town, I'm here. Even though it's going to be messy, even though people are already talking, especially because of that. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. You just don't believe it yet. They stayed like that until Maya came looking for them, and then the three of them walked back to the house together, tired but intact. The next morning, Ethan woke up to 17 missed calls. Most were from friends in town who'd heard about the gala, but 3 were from potential clients who'd seen his name mentioned in the early news coverage and wanted to hire him for projects. Apparently being publicly involved with Victoria Hale, scandal and all, was good for business. He was still processing that when Sophie came into the kitchen, dragging her blanket. Dad, there are people outside. Ethan looked out the window and cursed under his breath. 2 news vans were parked across the street, cameras pointed at his house. Stay inside, he told Sophie. I'll handle this. But when he opened the door, the reporters swarmed. Mister Cole, is it true you're in a relationship with Victoria Hale? How long has this been going on? Did you know about Richard Kensington's financial misconduct? Ethan held up a hand. I'm not answering questions about my personal life. If you want a statement, contact Ms. Hale's attorney. But, Mr. Cole, that's all I'm saying. Now get off my property before I call the cops. The reporters reluctantly backed off, but they didn't leave. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. Sophie stood in the hallway, looking worried. Are we in trouble? No, kiddo, just some people being nosy. Is it because of Maya's mom? Ethan sighed. There was no point lying to her. Yeah, people are interested in her, and now they're interested in us too. I don't like it. I know, me neither. He pulled her into a hug, but it'll calm down eventually. He hoped that was true. By Monday, the story had spread beyond Ridgemont. Regional news picked it up, then a few national outlets. The narrative varied depending on the source. Some painted Victoria as a victim of corporate greed, others as a careless executive who'd let her personal life compromise her judgment. Ethan appeared in most versions as either a blue-collar hero or an opportunistic gold digger, depending on the angle. Victoria called him that afternoon, sounding frayed.
Have you seen the headlines?
Hard to miss them. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you dragged into this.
I'm a grown man, Victoria. I made my choice. But Sophie is fine. Confused, but fine. We'll figure it out. There was a pause, then Victoria said, Richard's attorney called. He's threatening to sue for defamation unless I retract everything I said at the gala. Can he win? Sarah says no. Everything I said was true and provable.
But even a frivolous lawsuit costs money and time. She sounded exhausted. He's not going to stop, Ethan. He's going to keep coming after me until I break. Then we make sure you don't break. I'm running out of ways to stay strong. Ethan wished he could reach through the phone and hold her. You're not alone in this. Remember that. I know, She stopped. I keep thinking about what Maya said, about being scared but doing it anyway. And I wonder if I'm teaching her the right lesson or just showing her how to be stubborn. There's nothing wrong with stubborn. Stubborn keeps you alive. Victoria laughed weakly. Is that what we're doing? Just surviving? For now. But we'll get to the living part eventually. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his truck outside a job site, staring at his phone. The comments on the news articles were brutal. People who didn't know either of them making judgments about their character, their choices, their worth. He wanted to defend Victoria, to tell all these strangers they had no idea what she'd been through. But he knew it wouldn't matter. People believed what they wanted to believe. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay away from her. She's poison. You're just too stupid to see it. Ethan deleted it without responding. Then another came through. Gold digger. Then another. She'll ruin you like she ruins everything. He blocked the numbers and turned off his phone. That night, Sophie asked him if they were going to have to move. What? No. Why would you think that? Because Maya said people at school are saying mean things about her mom and about you. And I thought maybe we'd have to go somewhere else. Ethan pulled her onto his lap. We're not going anywhere. People say mean things sometimes, especially when they don't understand the whole story. But that doesn't change who we are or where we belong. Do you love her? Maya's mom? The question caught him off guard. He looked at his daughter's serious face and decided on honesty. Yeah, I do. Does she love you? I think so. Sophie considered this. Then the mean things people say don't matter. That's right. Okay. She hugged him. I like Maya, and her mom's always nice to me. So I think it's good, even if other people are being dumb about it. Ethan held her tight, grateful for her simple clarity. The injunction hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Victoria called Wednesday night, her voice tight with stress. Sarah says we have a shot, but Richard's lawyers are good. They're arguing that the funds were investment capital, not charitable donations, and that he has every legal right to reclaim them. What does Sarah say? That it depends on the judge, and on whether we can prove donor intent. Victoria sighed. We're scrambling to get affidavits from everyone who contributed, but some people don't want to get involved. They're scared of Richard. What can I do? She paused. Just be there? At the hearing? I know it's asking a lot, but I'll be there. Thank you. The courthouse was packed. Ethan had never seen so many lawyers in one place. He sat in the back row, watching Victoria and Sarah huddle over documents while Richard sat across the aisle with his team, looking smug. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The hearing started with procedural arguments that Ethan barely followed, legal jargon flying back and forth. But he watched Victoria's face, saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand kept clenching and unclenching. Richard's lead attorney was a sharp woman in an expensive suit who spoke with clinical precision. Your Honor, the funds in question were part of a structured investment agreement between Mr. Kensington and Ms. Hale's corporation. While Ms. Hale may have designated them for charitable purposes, the underlying ownership remained with Mr. Kensington per the terms of their contract. Sarah stood. Your Honor, the designation of these funds was explicit and documented. Every donor was told their contributions would support the Foundation's charitable mission. To allow Mr. Kensington to reclaim them now would constitute fraud. Ms. Brennan, fraud is a serious accusation. Do you have evidence? We have donor affidavits, Your Honor. Written statements confirming their contributions were intended exclusively for charity. Richard's attorney shot back. Intent doesn't override contract law. Mr. Kensington's agreement with Ms. Hale clearly states. The arguments went on for over an hour. Ethan watched Victoria grow paler, watched her bite her lip until it bled. When the judge finally called for a recess, Victoria looked like she might collapse. Ethan met her in the hallway. How's it going? Badly. The judge seemed sympathetic to Richard's argument. She leaned against the wall. If we lose this, it's over. Even with the new donations, we won't have enough to operate. You don't know that yet. Ethan, I'm trying to be optimistic, but... She stopped as Maya appeared with Victoria's assistant, looking nervous in her school uniform. Mom, they said I could see you for a minute. Victoria pulled her daughter into a hug. What are you doing here? You should be at school. I wanted to be here. For you. Maya looked at Richard through the courtroom doors, and her expression hardened. Is he going to win? I don't know, sweetheart. That's not fair. He's the one who did something wrong. Life isn't always fair. Maya pulled back, looking at her mother with those two old eyes. Then make it fair. You're Victoria Hale. You don't let people like him win. Before Victoria could respond, Sarah called her back into the courtroom. The afternoon session was even more intense, with both sides presenting evidence, witnesses, expert testimony. Ethan watched it unfold like a tennis match, back and forth, neither side giving ground. Finally, near 5 o'clock, the judge held up a hand. I've heard enough. I'll issue my ruling by end of business Friday. She looked at both parties. Until then, the funds in question remain frozen. Mr. Kensington, you will not move, transfer, or otherwise access them. Ms. Hale, you will not attempt to reclaim them. Is that clear? Both sides nodded. Good. We're adjourned. The gavel came down, and it was over. For now. Outside, Victoria stood on the courthouse steps, looking drained. Reporters shouted questions, but she ignored them, walking straight to Ethan. Friday, she said. Everything depends on Friday. Then we wait. I hate waiting. I know. She took his hand right there in front of everyone, and Ethan saw the cameras flash. Tomorrow's headlines would be interesting, but right now, he didn't care. They drove back to the estate in silence, Maya in the back seat playing on her phone. When they pulled up to the house, Victoria turned to Ethan. Stay for dinner? You sure that's a good idea? With everything going on, I'm sure. She looked at Maya in the rearview mirror. Right? Maya looked up. Yeah, Sophie can come too if she wants. We can watch a movie or something. So Ethan called Sophie's babysitter and told her to bring Sophie over, and an hour later they were all sitting in Victoria's kitchen, something he never thought would happen. Eating takeout pizza because nobody had the energy to cook. It was messy and awkward and weird. Maya and Sophie bickered over what movie to watch. Victoria's phone kept buzzing with work calls she ignored. Ethan felt completely out of place in the massive kitchen with its marble counters and professional appliances, but it was also normal, human, real. After the girls went to watch their movie, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up together. This is strange, Victoria said, scraping plates. What is? This, you being here, acting like a family. A bad strange? No, just... She smiled. I never thought I'd have this. Something simple and normal. It's not that normal. Pretty sure normal families don't have their lives dissected in the news. Fair point. Victoria loaded the dishwasher, but it's closer than I've ever been. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. Then Victoria said, What if we lose on Friday? We'll figure it out. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Ethan dried his hands and turned to face her. Look, I can't promise everything's going to work out. I can't tell you the judge will rule in your favor or that Richard will just disappear, but I can promise I'll be here, whatever happens. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Why? Because I love you and because you're worth fighting for. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, and Ethan pulled her close, wishing he could protect her from everything coming their way. From the living room, they heard Maya yell, "Gross, we can see you!" They broke apart, laughing, and the moment shattered into something lighter. Friday arrived with rain. Ethan showed up at the courthouse early, found Victoria already there with Sarah, both of them looking like they hadn't slept. The courtroom filled quickly, donors, board members, reporters, curiosity seekers. Richard arrived last, flanked by his lawyers, looking confident. The judge entered at exactly 9 o'clock. "I've reviewed all the evidence and arguments presented," she began without preamble. "This case hinges on a question of intent versus contract law. Mr. Kensington's contracts are, unfortunately, legally sound. However," she paused, and Ethan saw Victoria grip Sarah's hand. "However, the evidence of donor intent is overwhelming. The affidavits provided by Ms. Hale's team clearly demonstrate that contributors believed their funds would be used exclusively for charitable purposes. To allow Mr. Kensington to reclaim them would violate the principle of charitable trust." Richard's attorney stood. "Your Honor, with respect, I'm not finished." The judge's voice was sharp. "I'm issuing a permanent injunction against Mr. Kensington's access to the disputed funds. Furthermore, I'm ordering an audit of all transactions between Mr. Kensington and the Hale Foundation to determine if additional financial impropriety occurred." The courtroom erupted. Richard's face went purple with rage. His attorney tried to object, but the judge cut her off. "My ruling stands. Ms. Hale, the funds will be returned to the foundation within 72 hours. Use them wisely." The gavel came down, and it was over. Victoria sat frozen for a moment, like she couldn't process what had just happened. Then Sarah grabbed her in a hug, and the reality hit. They'd won. Outside, reporters mobbed them, but this time Victoria stopped to make a statement. "Today is a victory not just for the Hale Foundation, but for everyone who believes that justice still matters. Richard Kensington tried to destroy something good out of spite, and he failed. The work continues." Short, strong, final. Then she took Ethan's hand and walked away, and the cameras captured every second of it. That night, Victoria threw a small celebration at the house. Just the core team, a few board members, Maya, and Sophie. It was nothing like the gala, just people who'd fought together, relieved to have survived. Ethan found Victoria on the back patio, looking out over her property. "You okay?" he asked. "I won," she said, like she was testing the words. "We actually won." "Yeah, you did." "So why do I still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop?" Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Because you've been fighting for so long, you forgot what winning feels like." Victoria leaned back against him. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild, make the foundation stronger. Make sure Richard can never touch it again. And us? We keep going, one day at a time." Victoria turned in his arms. "I want more than one day at a time. I want—" She stopped, searching for the words. "I want a real life. With you. Not hiding, not apologizing, just living." "Then we do that." "It's not going to be easy. People are still going to talk. Richard's going to fight the audit." And Ethan kissed her, cutting off the spiral of worry. When he pulled back, he said, "I know, but we'll handle it. Together." Victoria smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. Inside, they could hear Maya and Sophie laughing, music playing, the sound of people who'd survived something hard and come out the other side. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect, but it was real. And right now, that was enough. The celebration didn't last long. By Monday morning, the audit had officially begun, and with it came a new wave of scrutiny. State regulators descended on Victoria's offices, requesting files dating back 7 years. The foundation's phones rang constantly with questions from donors, board members, and reporters wanting statements about what the audit might uncover. Ethan watched Victoria navigate it all with a kind of exhausted grace, but he could see it wearing on her. She was at the office by 6 every morning and rarely home before 10 at night. When she was home, she was distracted, apologizing to Maya for missing dinner again, promising things would settle down soon. They both knew she was lying. On Wednesday, Ethan was installing crown molding in a client's dining room when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer Park from Channel 7 News. I was hoping to get a comment about your relationship with Victoria Hale. No comment, Ethan said immediately. We're running a story tonight about the Foundation audit. Sources say the investigation has expanded beyond Richard Kensington's transactions. Can you confirm whether Ms. Hale is under investigation? I said no comment. Mr. Cole, the public has a right to... He hung up and blocked the number, but his hands were shaking. If the audit had expanded to include Victoria herself, that meant someone was feeding the investigators information, and there was only one person vindictive enough to do that. He called Victoria, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Sarah next. Ethan, I can't talk right now. Is Victoria under investigation? Sarah went quiet. That was answer enough. What happened? Ethan asked. Someone, and we both know who, submitted an anonymous complaint alleging that Victoria misappropriated donor funds for personal expenses. It's complete garbage, but the state has to investigate any formal complaint. What kind of personal expenses? The guest house renovation. They're claiming she used foundation money to pay you. Ethan felt his stomach drop. That's insane. She paid me from her personal account. I have the checks. I know, and we'll prove it. But in the meantime, the optics are terrible. Foundation director under investigation for funneling money to her contractor boyfriend. Sarah's frustration was audible. Richard's playing this perfectly. Even if Victoria's cleared, the damage to her reputation could be permanent. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his truck staring at his phone. He'd known getting involved with Victoria would be complicated, but he hadn't anticipated this. Being weaponized against her turned into evidence of corruption. His next call came from a client canceling a job. Then another. By the end of the day, he'd lost 3 contracts, all with vague excuses about scheduling conflicts or budget concerns. But Ethan knew the truth. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who might be involved in a fraud investigation. That night, he drove to Victoria's office. Her assistant tried to stop him, but he walked past her into Victoria's office, where she sat surrounded by banker's boxes full of files, her eyes red-rimmed. You should be home, Ethan said. Victoria looked up, startled. Ethan, what are you? We need to talk. She glanced at her assistant, who was hovering in the doorway. It's okay, Melissa. You can go home. I'll lock up. When they were alone, Victoria stood and tried to smile. Sorry, I meant to call you back. I know what's happening. Sarah told me. Victoria's face fell. Then you know it's a nightmare. They're going through every transaction from the last 5 years. Every dinner, every hotel room, every conference I attended. Looking for something to justify Richard's accusation. Are they going to find anything? No, because there's nothing to find. I kept my personal and professional finances completely separate, but it doesn't matter. Just the investigation itself is damaging enough. Ethan crossed the room to her. What can I do? Nothing. This is my problem to solve. It's not just your problem when they're dragging my name into it. Victoria flinched. I know. I'm sorry. If I'd known Richard would go this far, stop apologizing. This isn't your fault. He took her hands. But we need to be smart about this. If they're looking at the guest house renovation, we need to document everything. Show them the checks, the invoices, the timeline. Prove there was no connection to foundation funds. Sarah's already on it. We're pulling together all the paperwork. Good. What else? Victoria sank back into her chair. I need to prepare for the possibility that this gets worse. If Richard can manufacture enough smoke, even without fire, the board might ask me to step down temporarily, just until the investigation concludes. Would you do that? I don't know. Part of me wants to fight it, refuse to be pushed out of my own foundation. But another part of me thinks maybe it's the smart move. Remove myself as a target. Let the audit proceed without the distraction of defending me. Ethan pulled up a chair beside her. What do you want to do? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I want to burn Richard's entire world down. I want to expose every shady deal he's ever made, every person he's ever screwed over. I want him to feel what it's like to be systematically destroyed. But that would make me just like him. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want Maya to see me become that person. Then you take the high road. You cooperate with the investigation, prove you did nothing wrong, and let Richard's vendetta expose him for what he is. And if that's not enough, if he wins anyway? Ethan squeezed her hand. Then we deal with it. But we don't give up before we have to.
Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that in the quiet office, surrounded by evidence of a life she'd built and someone was trying to tear down. The next morning, Ethan woke up to Sophie shaking his shoulder. Dad, wake up! He opened his eyes to find her holding his phone. What's wrong? There are people outside again. And Maya just called. She's crying. Ethan sat up fast, taking the phone. 3 missed calls from Maya, 2 from Victoria. He called Victoria back. Ethan, thank God. Is Sophie with you? Yeah, she's here. What's going on? Someone leaked the investigation to the press. It's everywhere, and they're... Her voice broke. They're parked outside Maya's school. She can't get inside without them swarming her with questions about me. Ethan was already pulling on clothes. Where is she now? Still in the car with her driver, but she's terrified, and I'm 40 minutes away. I can't... I'll get her. Tell the driver to wait for me. He dropped Sophie at a friend's house with a hurried explanation, then drove across town to Maya's private school. Sure enough, news vans lined the street, reporters clustered near the entrance. Ethan spotted Victoria's car parked a block away. He pulled up beside it and got out. The driver, an older man named James, looked relieved to see him. Mr. Cole, Miss Maya's in the back. Ethan opened the door to find Maya huddled in the corner, her face blotchy from crying. Hey, he said softly. Your mom sent me. I can't go in there, Maya whispered. They're going to ask me about the investigation, about whether my mom stole money. Everyone's going to think they're not going to get the chance. Ethan climbed into the car. James, can you pull around to the back entrance? There isn't a back entrance, sir. Just the front. Ethan thought fast. Okay, then we do this the direct way. Maya, you stay between me and James. Don't look at the cameras. Don't answer any questions. Just walk. I'm scared. I know, but you're Victoria Hale's daughter, and Hale women don't run. Maya managed a shaky smile at that. She says that because it's true. Ready? Maya nodded, and they got out of the car. Immediately, reporters surged forward. Maya, is your mother under investigation? Did she misuse charity funds? How do you feel about your mom dating her employee? Ethan put himself between Maya and the cameras, one hand on her shoulder. Back off. She's a kid. Mr. Cole, is it true you received payments from... I said back off. James flanked Maya's other side, and together they pushed through the crowd. Someone shoved a microphone too close, and Ethan knocked it away. A camera flashed directly in Maya's face, and he heard her make a small, scared sound. That's enough! The voice came from behind them. Ethan turned to see the school principal, a stern woman in her 60s, standing in the doorway. This is private property. If you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police. The reporters reluctantly backed up, and Ethan got Maya inside. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, Ethan said. The principal, Mrs. Ashford, looked at Maya with concern. Are you all right, dear? Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Mr. Cole, perhaps Maya should take the day off. Return when this media frenzy has calmed down. No. Maya's voice was small but firm. No, I want to stay. I have a math test. Mrs. Ashford and Ethan exchanged glances. Are you sure? Ethan asked. If I leave, they win. That's what my mom would say. Despite everything, Ethan felt proud of her. Okay, but if it gets too much, you call me or your mom. Deal? Deal. After Maya left for her classroom, Mrs. Ashford walked Ethan to the exit. Mr. Cole, I want you to know that this school supports the Hale family. Victoria has been a generous donor and an exemplary parent. Whatever the media is saying, it doesn't change that. Thank you. That means more than you know. However, Mrs. Ashford continued, I do need to ask that you coordinate with us on security going forward. If this media attention continues, we may need to implement additional measures to protect all our students. Of course. I'll talk to Victoria. Ethan left through a side door, avoiding the reporters who were still lingering out front. On the drive home, he called Victoria and filled her in. Is she okay? Victoria asked immediately. Shaken, but okay.
She insisted on staying for her math test.
Victoria laughed wetly. That sounds like her. Victoria, this is getting out of hand. Maybe we should… Should what? Hide? Give Richard exactly what he wants? I was going to say higher security, for Maya, at least. Victoria was quiet. You're right. I'll call someone today. And for you, you need protection too. Ethan, I'm serious. Richard's escalating. Who knows what he'll do next? Fine. Security for both of us. Happy? Not particularly, but it's a start. That afternoon, Sarah called an emergency meeting at the foundation offices. When Ethan arrived, he found Victoria, the board president, and two attorneys he didn't recognize. What's going on? He asked. Sarah gestured to an empty chair. Sit. You need to hear this. The board president, a distinguished older woman named Catherine Torres, spoke first. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. We've just learned that the investigation has expanded again. The state is now looking into whether Victoria engaged in a pattern of financial impropriety, not just the guest house renovation. Based on what evidence? Ethan demanded. Anonymous tips. Multiple sources claiming they witnessed Victoria using foundation credit cards for personal expenses. Catherine's expression was grave. We believe Richard is orchestrating this, but proving it is another matter. One of the attorneys, a sharp-eyed man named Marcus, jumped in. The problem is, even if the tips are fabricated, the state has to investigate, and each new allegation extends the timeline. How long are we talking about? Victoria asked. Months, potentially. Maybe longer if they keep finding new threads to pull. Victoria's face went pale. Months. Which is why, Catherine said gently, the board thinks it might be best if you took a temporary leave of absence, just until this is resolved. The room went silent. Ethan watched Victoria process this, saw her hands clench and unclench. You want me to step down, she said flatly. Not step down, step aside, temporarily. It would remove you as a focal point and allow the investigation to proceed more smoothly. And make it look like I'm guilty, like I'm running away. Or it makes you look like you're putting the foundation first, Marcus countered. Victoria, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but the longer you're at the center of this, the more damage it does to the foundation itself. Donations are already down 30% this week. If this continues, you won't have a foundation to lead. Victoria turned to Ethan, and he saw the question in her eyes. He wanted to tell her to fight, to refuse, to make them force her out. But he also knew Marcus was right. The foundation was bigger than her ego. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I don't know. Victoria looked at Catherine. If I agree to this, who takes over? I will, temporarily. Just administrative oversight. You'd still be consulted on major decisions. And when the investigation clears me, you come back, full authority restored. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood. I need to think about it. Give me 24 hours. Catherine nodded. Of course. But Victoria, please consider what's best for everyone involved, including yourself. Outside in the parking lot, Victoria leaned against her car and stared at the sky. They're asking me to give up my mother's legacy, she said. Everything she built, everything I've spent a decade protecting. And I'm supposed to just walk away because Richard Kensington is a vindictive bastard. You're not walking away. You're being strategic. It doesn't feel strategic. It feels like losing. Ethan pulled her into his arms. Then don't do it. Fight it. Make them drag you out, kicking and screaming. And destroy the foundation in the process? Prove that I care more about my pride than the mission? She shook her head. That's not who I want to be? Then what do you want? Victoria pulled back and looked at him. I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning. I want one day where I don't wake up wondering what fresh hell Richard has planned. I want… Her voice cracked. I want this to be over. It will be, eventually. When? When I've lost everything? When Maya can't go to school without being harassed? When you can't get work because you're associated with me? Victoria, I saw the news, Ethan. I know you've been losing contracts. Don't pretend it's not happening. He couldn't deny it. I'll be fine. No, you won't, and neither will I, not if this keeps going. She took a shaky breath. Maybe stepping aside is the right move. Maybe it's the only move that makes sense anymore. Ethan wanted to argue, but he could see the exhaustion in her face, The weight of carrying this alone. Whatever you decide, I'm here. I know. That's the only thing keeping me sane. That night, Victoria came to his house. A first. She showed up at 8 with Maya in tow, both of them looking wrung out. I'm sorry to just appear, Victoria said. But the media found out where we live. They're camped outside the gates. I couldn't... It's fine. Come in. Sophie was delighted to have Maya over, and the girls disappeared upstairs within minutes. Ethan made coffee while Victoria sat at his kitchen table, looking around at the modest space. This is nice, she said. It's small. It's cozy, lived in. She smiled sadly. Not like my house. That place has always felt like a museum, pretty to look at, but not really for living. Ethan set a mug in front of her. You could change that. Could I? Or is it just who I am now? The woman who lives in the museum plays the part and forgets what real feels like. You haven't forgotten. You're just scared to reach for it. Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug. I've been thinking about what Catherine said, about stepping aside, and I think she's right. Not because I'm guilty, but because staying at the center of this is selfish. The foundation can't survive if donors keep pulling out. Programs are already being cut. If I care about the mission, really care, I have to remove myself as the liability. So you're going to do it? I think I have to. She looked at him. Does that make me a coward? No. It makes you someone who's willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. It doesn't feel noble. It feels like Richard winning. Only if you let it be the end. But it's not. It's just a temporary setback. Victoria nodded, but she didn't look convinced. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, listening to the girls laugh upstairs. Can I ask you something? Victoria said finally. Always. Why are you still here? Really? You've lost work, been dragged through the media, had your life turned upside down? You could walk away any time, so why don't you? Ethan considered the question. Because I spent 10 years walking away from things that scared me. My marriage, my dreams, anything that felt too hard or too risky. And I survived, but I wasn't living. Then you showed up again, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want something enough to fight for it. Even if fighting means losing? Even then, Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. You do. You just don't believe it yet. She reached across the table and took his hand, and they sat like that until Maya and Sophie came downstairs demanding snacks. The next morning, Victoria called Catherine and agreed to the temporary leave. The board issued a statement that afternoon, carefully worded, emphasizing Victoria's commitment to the foundation and framing the leave as a mutual decision to protect the organization during the investigation. The media spun it as an admission of guilt anyway. Ethan watched the coverage with a growing sense of anger. Every channel seemed to have a different theory about what Victoria had done, ranging from minor accounting errors to full-scale embezzlement. None of them mentioned Richard's role. None of them questioned why a successful businesswoman would risk everything over a few $1,000s. His phone rang, Sophie's school. Mr. Cole, this is Principal Davidson. I'm calling because there was an incident today involving Sophie. Ethan's stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Another student said some unkind things about you and Ms. Hale. Sophie defended you, and it escalated into a physical altercation. Is she hurt? No, the other child has a bruised arm, but nothing serious. However, our policy is clear. Physical violence results in a suspension. I understand. Can I speak to her? A moment later, Sophie's tearful voice came on the line. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push her. But she said you were a criminal and that Maya's mom was a thief, and It's okay, Soph. We'll talk about it when I pick you up. After he hung up, Ethan sat in his truck, hands gripping the steering wheel. This was affecting his daughter now, actually hurting her. And for what? Because he'd fallen in love with someone Richard Kensington wanted to destroy? He called Victoria and told her what happened. Oh no, Ethan, I'm so sorry. If Sophie's being targeted because of me, it's not your fault. It feels like it is. It feels like everyone around me is paying for my mistakes. You didn't make any mistakes. Richard did. He's the one doing this. Then why does it feel like I'm the one being punished? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. That weekend, things got worse. Someone leaked Victoria's personal financial records to a tabloid website.
Not foundation records, her private bank statements, tax returns, credit card bills. All of it splashed across the internet for anyone to see. The invasion of privacy was staggering. The website highlighted every expensive purchase, every luxury hotel, every high-end restaurant, painting a picture of wasteful excess. They even found receipts from her mother's funeral 5 years ago and criticized the cost of the flowers. Victoria called him, barely coherent. They published everything: where I shop, what I spend, where Maya goes to school. They even listed my home address with photos of the property. Have you called Sarah? She's already on it. But Ethan, they published Maya's school. What if someone... I'm coming over, right now. He found Victoria at the estate, security guards now stationed at the gate. She was in her office, surrounded by printouts of the leaked documents, her hands shaking. How did they get these? She asked. These are my private records. My accountant swears it was in his office. My bank says their systems are secure. So how? Richard has connections, money. He probably hired someone to hack your accounts. That's illegal. So is blackmail and fraud, but he's doing those too. Ethan knelt beside her chair. Victoria, you need to go to the police, file a report. And say what? That someone leaked my financial information? They'll say I should have been more careful with my passwords. This is criminal harassment. They need to investigate. Victoria looked at him with hollow eyes. You still think the system works? That if we just follow the rules, everything will be fair, but it won't. Richard has too much power, too many connections. He's untouchable. He's not. Nobody is. Then why is he winning? Before Ethan could answer, Maya burst into the office, her face white. Mom? Mom, there are people at the school gates. They're taking pictures and asking questions about you. Mrs. Ashford said we might need to do remote learning until this dies down. Victoria stood abruptly. No, absolutely not. You're not losing your education because of this. But, Mom, I'll figure something out. I'll hire tutors. I'll transfer you to a different school. Victoria stopped, overwhelmed. I'll fix this. Maya crossed the room and hugged her mother. It's okay. Remote learning might be better anyway. At least then I don't have to see everyone whispering about us. Victoria held her daughter tight, and Ethan saw her composure finally crack. She was trying so hard to protect Maya, to keep everything together, but it was all falling apart anyway. After Maya left, Victoria sank back into her chair. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. Every day is something new. Every day I wake up wondering what Richard's going to destroy next. And I'm tired, Ethan. I'm so tired. Then fight back. Stop playing defense and go on offense. How? Everything I do, he twists into something ugly. If I defend myself, I look guilty. If I stay quiet, I look weak. Then we find something on him. We dig into his business, his finances, his past. There has to be something we can use. Victoria shook her head. I'm not becoming him. I'm not going to ruin someone's life just because they ruined mine. Even if it means he keeps winning. Even then, Ethan wanted to shake her, wanted to make her see that taking the high road was just getting her buried, but he also understood. She was fighting to remain who she was, not to become what Richard wanted her to be. Okay, he said finally. Then we wait him out. We document everything, we cooperate with the investigation, and we prove you did nothing wrong. And eventually, he'll make a mistake. And if he doesn't, then we adapt. Victoria looked at him with something like wonder. How are you so calm about this? I'm not. I'm furious. But losing my temper won't help you, so I'm channeling it into something useful. She managed a weak smile. What would I do without you? Let's not find out. That night, as Ethan was leaving, Victoria walked him to his truck. I've been thinking, she said, about us, about what this is costing you. Ethan's chest tightened. Don't. Don't what? Don't try to push me away again. We're past that. Are we? Because it seems like every week things get worse, and I keep thinking maybe Richard's right. Maybe I am poison. Maybe everyone around me would be better off if I just... Ethan kissed her, hard and desperate, cutting off the spiral. When he pulled back, he gripped her shoulders. Listen to me. Richard wants you to believe that. He wants you isolated and afraid and convinced you deserve this, but you don't. And I'm not going anywhere. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. What if I can't fix this? Then we live with it, together. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair. She kissed him again, softer this time, and Ethan held her in the darkness of her driveway, both of them pretending the world wasn't falling apart around them. On Monday, the audit investigators called Victoria in for another interview. Sarah advised her to be brief, answer only what was asked, and volunteer nothing. Ethan waited outside the government building, watching people come and go. After 3 hours, Victoria emerged looking drained. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They asked about you, about our relationship, about when it started, about whether you'd ever done work for the foundation." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we knew each other years ago, reconnected recently, and that I hired you for personal renovation work paid from my personal account." They seemed skeptical. Of course they did. Richard probably told them to be. They walked to Victoria's car in silence. As she unlocked the door, she said, "They asked if I thought you were using me for money." Ethan stopped. "What?" "They wanted to know if I was aware that you'd had financial difficulties, that you'd filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago, that you might have a motive to manipulate me." Rage flooded through him. I know. I told them you were the most honest person I'd ever met, that if anyone was being manipulated, it was you putting up with my mess." Victoria's smile was tired. "I don't think they believed me. I don't care what they believe. I do. Because their belief shapes the narrative, and the narrative shapes the outcome." She got into the car. "I'm starting to think Richard's already won. He's poisoned everything so thoroughly that even when we prove I'm innocent, people will still doubt. They'll still wonder, and that doubt will follow me forever." Ethan leaned into the car window. "Then we give them something else to talk about. We show them who you really are." "And who's that?" "Someone worth believing in." Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's try." But as Ethan watched her drive away, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Richard was tightening the noose with every leaked document, every anonymous tip, every piece of carefully constructed evidence, and soon there wouldn't be anything left to salvage. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Walk away while you still can. She's going down, and she'll take you with her." Ethan deleted it without responding. But the message stayed with him, echoing in his head as he drove home. What if they were right? What if staying with Victoria meant destroying himself too? He pushed the thought away. He'd made his choice. And whatever came next, he'd face it beside her, even if it meant losing everything. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, and it came from the most unexpected direction. Ethan was at a job site, one of the few clients who hadn't canceled, when Sarah called, her voice tight with urgency. "Ethan, where are you?" "Northside. Why?" "Get to the foundation offices, now. Don't ask questions, just come." He made it there in 15 minutes, his mind racing through possibilities. When he walked into the conference room, he found Sarah, Victoria, Catherine Torres, and a man he didn't recognize, mid-50s, expensive suit, tired eyes. "Mr. Cole," Catherine said, "thank you for coming. This is Daniel Reeves. He worked as Richard Kensington's senior accountant until this morning." Ethan looked at Reeves. "What's going on?" Reeves opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I quit today because I couldn't live with what Richard asked me to do. For the past 3 months, he's had me creating false documentation to support his claims against Ms. Hale. Fabricated receipts, altered transaction records, fake witness statements, all of it designed to make her look guilty." The room went silent. Victoria sat very still, her face pale. "Why are you telling us this?" Ethan asked. "Because I have a daughter," Reeves said quietly. "She's 13, and when I went home last night and looked at her, I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't participate in destroying someone's life just because my boss told me to." He pushed the folder toward Victoria. "This is everything. Every document Richard fabricated, every payment he made to people who gave false tips to investigators, every illegal thing he's done to orchestrate this whole situation. It's all here." Victoria reached for the folder with shaking hands. "This proves I'm innocent." "More than that," Sarah said, and there was fire in her voice now. "This proves Richard committed fraud, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. We can have him arrested." Catherine leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves, you understand what you're giving us could send Richard to prison?" "I understand, and I'll testify to all of it." Reeves looked at Victoria. I'm sorry, I should have come forward sooner. I just... He stopped, shook his head. I was scared of him, but I'm more scared of who I'd become if I kept helping him. After Reeves left with a promise to meet with prosecutors the next morning, the room erupted into action. Sarah started making calls to the state investigators, to the media, to anyone who'd listen. Catherine worked on drafting a statement for the board, and Victoria just sat there, staring at the folder like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Ethan crouched beside her chair. You okay? I don't know. She looked at him, eyes wide. Is it really over? I think so, yeah. Just like that? After months of hell, someone walks in with a folder and it's done? Sometimes that's how it happens. The bad guy makes one mistake, one person grows a conscience, and everything unravels. Victoria let out a shaky laugh. I keep waiting for the catch, for Richard to somehow turn this around too. He can't, not this time. But even as he said it, Ethan felt uneasy. Richard Kensington hadn't gotten where he was by giving up easily. And something about this felt too convenient, too clean. His instinct proved right 3 hours later. Sarah's phone rang while they were still at the office, coordinating the next steps. Her expression went from confusion to alarm as she listened. When? She demanded. How long ago? She hung up and looked at Victoria. Richard's attorneys just filed an emergency injunction claiming Reeves stole proprietary documents and that everything he gave us is inadmissible. Can they do that? Ethan asked. They're trying. The hearing's tomorrow morning. If the judge sides with them, all of Reeves's evidence gets thrown out and we're back to square one. Victoria stood abruptly. Then we make sure the judge doesn't side with them. What do we need? Reeves to testify that he created those documents as part of his employment, which makes them subject to whistleblower protection. And we need to prove Richard's claim of theft is retaliatory. Sarah started gathering papers. I'll prep Reeves tonight. Victoria, you should go home. Get some rest. I'm not resting until this is finished. They worked until almost midnight building the case for tomorrow's hearing. Ethan stayed beside Victoria the whole time, watching her transform from exhausted victim to fierce fighter. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with, not the polished CEO or the society figure, but this version, the one who refused to quit even when everything seemed hopeless. Finally, Sarah sent them home with instructions to be at the courthouse by 8. In the parking lot, Victoria leaned against her car and tipped her head back, staring at the stars. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if the judge believes Richard? What if we lose Reeves's testimony? Then we find another way. There might not be another way. Ethan pulled her close. There's always another way. We just have to be willing to find it. Victoria wrapped her arms around his waist and held on like he was the only thing keeping her grounded. I love you. I don't think I've said that enough, but I do. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. I know. I love you too. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness, gathering strength for whatever came next. The courthouse was packed the next morning. Richard's legal team filled one side of the gallery, Victoria's supporters the other. Ethan spotted reporters, board members, curious onlookers. Even Maya was there with Victoria's assistant, insisting she wanted to see this through. When Richard walked in, flanked by lawyers, his eyes found Victoria immediately. The look he gave her was pure venom, and Ethan felt his hands clench into fists. This man had systematically tried to destroy the woman he loved, and now he had the audacity to act like the victim. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Palmer, called the hearing to order. Richard's attorney stood first. Your Honor, Daniel Reeves violated his employment contract and fiduciary duty to his employer by stealing confidential documents. The material he turned over to Ms. Hale's legal team is proprietary and protected. We're asking for an immediate injunction preventing its use and demanding Mr. Reeves face criminal charges for theft. Sarah countered smoothly. Your Honor, Mr. Reeves isn't a thief. He's a whistleblower exposing criminal activity by his employer. The documents in question prove Mr. Kensington engaged in fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. These are not proprietary business materials. They're evidence of crimes. Judge Palmer looked at Richard's attorney. Do you have proof these documents are proprietary business materials? The mere fact that they were created during Mr. Reeves's employment makes them company property.
Your Honor. That's not what I asked. Do you have proof they're legitimate business documents and not, as Ms. Brennan alleges, evidence of criminal activity? The attorney hesitated. We'd need time to review the specific materials to determine. In other words, no. Judge Palmer turned to Sarah. Ms.
Brennan, I'm inclined to allow Mr. Reeves's testimony. However, I want to hear from him directly. Mr. Reeves, please approach. Daniel Reeves stood and walked to the witness stand, looking nervous but determined. After being sworn in, Sarah questioned him. Mr. Reeves, how long did you work for Richard Kensington? 7 years. And during that time, did Mr. Kensington ever ask you to engage in unethical or illegal activities? Objection, Richard's attorney called, leading the witness. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Reeves. Reeves took a breath. Yes, multiple times. He asked me to hide assets during divorce proceedings for his clients, to create offshore accounts to avoid taxes, to falsify records for insurance claims. And did you do these things? To my shame, yes, I did. What changed? Reeves looked directly at Richard. 3 months ago, he asked me to fabricate evidence against Victoria Hale. He gave me specific details about what to create. Fake receipts showing she'd used foundation funds for personal expenses, altered transaction records, false statements from witnesses who didn't exist. He wanted to destroy her, and he didn't care if it was legal or moral. He just wanted it done. And you agreed? At first, yes, because I was afraid of him. Richard Kensington is a powerful man, and I'd seen what he did to people who crossed him. But the more I worked on this, the more I realized I couldn't live with myself if I helped him succeed. Sarah pulled out documents from the folder Reeves had provided. Are these the materials you created under Mr. Kensington's direction? Yes. And are you willing to testify under oath that these documents are fabrications designed to frame Ms. Hale for crimes she didn't commit? Yes. Richard's attorney jumped up. Your Honor, this is clearly a coordinated attack by Ms. Hale's team to— Sit down, counselor, Judge Palmer said sharply. She looked at Reeves. Mr. Reeves, you understand that by testifying to this, you're admitting to participating in criminal activity yourself? I do, Your Honor, and I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from that. Judge Palmer studied him for a long moment, then turned to Richard's attorney. I'm denying your injunction. Mr. Reeves's testimony and documents are admissible. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Kensington's activities based on the allegations presented here today. Richard shot to his feet. This is absurd. You're taking the word of a disgruntled employee over— Mr. Kensington, sit down and be quiet, or I'll hold you in contempt. Judge Palmer's voice was ice. I've heard enough to know something very wrong happened here. Whether it's prosecutable is for the state to determine. But this injunction is denied and this hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down and chaos erupted. Reporters swarmed toward Richard, who was shouting at his lawyers. Victoria sat frozen in her seat, tears streaming down her face. Sarah was on her phone, already coordinating with the prosecutors. Ethan pulled Victoria to her feet and guided her out a side exit, away from the cameras. They made it to the parking garage before she finally broke, collapsing against him. It's over, she gasped. It's really over. Yeah, it is. Maya found them there, and Victoria pulled her daughter into the embrace. The three of them stood together, holding each other while the world kept spinning around them. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind. The state prosecutors launched a formal investigation into Richard. Major news outlets picked up the story, and the narrative shifted overnight from disgraced CEO under investigation to whistleblower exposes corporate fraud. Donors who'd pulled out started calling, apologizing, pledging support. The board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to reinstate Victoria as director. But the moment that mattered most to Ethan came 4 days later, when the state officially cleared Victoria of all allegations and issued a public statement confirming that the claims against her had been fabricated. He was at her house when she got the call from Sarah. He watched her face as she listened, saw the disbelief give way to relief, saw her hand shake as she hung up. They cleared me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Completely. They're recommending charges against Richard for fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. It's over. It's really, actually over. Ethan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She held on to him like she'd never let go, and he felt her shoulders shake with sobs. Not sad ones this time, but the kind that came from releasing months of tension and fear. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "You survived." "We survived," she corrected.
I couldn't have if you hadn't been here, but I was, and I'm not going anywhere.
Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed and they sat together on Victoria's back patio, she asked him the question he'd been waiting for. "What happens now? With us, I mean. The crisis is over. The drama's done. What do we do with normal?" Ethan considered that.
I guess we figure it out day by day.
"That's not much of a plan."
No, but it's honest.
He turned to face her. "Victoria, I know you're used to having everything mapped out, every contingency planned for. But maybe normal means not having all the answers. Maybe it means just showing up and seeing what happens. That terrifies me." "I know, but you're good at being terrified and doing it anyway." Victoria laughed softly. "Maya said something similar. She's a smart kid, gets it from her mom." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching lights twinkle in the valley below. Then Victoria said, "I've been thinking about the foundation, about what I want it to be now that I have control again. And I want it to be smaller, more focused, less about image and more about actual impact." She looked at him. "I spent so long trying to make it this massive, impressive thing that would prove I was worthy of my mother's legacy. But I forgot that she started it to help people, not to build an empire." "So what does that look like?" "I don't know yet, but I think it means stepping back from the corporate side, letting other people handle the business while I focus on the mission, maybe even relocating to a smaller space, cutting overhead, putting more money into programs instead of administration." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You'd give up the downtown office? The staff? All of it?" "Not all of it, but enough to make it manageable. Sustainable. Something I can actually run without sacrificing every other part of my life." "And what would you do with the rest of your time?" Victoria smiled. "I was hoping you'd have some ideas about that." The implications of that hit him slowly. "Victoria, I'm not asking for promises or commitments or anything you're not ready for," she said quickly. "I'm just saying that for the first time in a decade, I get to choose what my life looks like. And I'd like it to include you, actually include you, not just stolen moments between crises." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. "What about this place? The estate? What about it?" "It's a lot of house for 2 people and a couple of kids who'll be gone in a few years." Victoria looked around at the massive property, the perfectly landscaped grounds, the house that had always felt more like a museum than a home. "You're right, it is. So maybe it's time for something different, something that actually feels like living instead of existing." 3 months later, Victoria put the estate on the market. The news made regional headlines. Billionaire heiress downsizes. But Victoria didn't care. She was too busy falling in love with a 100-year-old farmhouse 30 minutes outside of Ridgemont that needed everything replaced and had enough land for Sophie and Maya to actually be kids. Ethan walked through it with her on a Sunday afternoon, mentally cataloging everything that needed work. "The foundation's shot," he said, pressing on a questionable floorboard. "Can you fix it?" "Yeah, but it'll take time." "We have time." He looked at her, saw her standing in the empty living room with sunlight streaming through ancient windows, and realized she meant it. They had time. No more crises, no more emergencies, just time to build something real. "The roof needs replacing too," he said, "and the plumbing's probably original. This is going to be a massive project." "Good thing I know a contractor. He's expensive. I'll work something out." Victoria crossed the room to him. "What do you think? Could you see yourself here?" Ethan looked around the space, at the exposed beams, the worn hardwood, the windows that needed replacing. He thought about what it could be with enough work and care. A real home, not a showpiece. A place where people lived messy, imperfect lives and didn't apologize for it. "Yeah," he said, "I could see it." Victoria smiled, the real kind that reached her eyes. "Then let's do it." They closed on the house 2 months later. By then, Victoria had restructured the foundation, hired a small but dedicated staff, and moved operations into a modest office space downtown. She'd also started sleeping through the night for the first time in years, spending weekends with Maya instead of working, and slowly remembering what it felt like to be happy. Richard Kensington was indicted on 14 counts of fraud and related charges. His trial was set for the following year, but his empire was already crumbling. Clients abandoned him, investors pulled out, and the media that had once praised him turned on him with savage efficiency. Ethan watched it happen with a kind of grim satisfaction, though Victoria refused to follow the coverage.
"I don't need to watch him fall," she told Ethan one night while they painted the farmhouse kitchen together. "I just need to build something better." Maya and Sophie had become inseparable, spending weekends at the farmhouse helping with renovation work, or just being kids in a way neither of them had been able to before. Watching them together, covered in paint or dirt or whatever project they'd gotten into, reminded Ethan why all of it had been worth it. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Ethan was replacing windows in what would eventually be his and Victoria's bedroom when she appeared in the doorway with coffee. "How's it going?" she asked. "Slow. These windows are older than both of us combined." She set the coffee down and came to stand beside him, looking out at the property. "Do you ever regret it? Getting involved with all my mess?" "No? Not even a little?" "Not even a little." He turned to face her. "Do you?" "Regret you? Never. Regret the mess? Sometimes, but not because of you, because I wasted so many years trying to be someone I wasn't." "You're not wasting them now." "No, I'm not." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you. For staying. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You would have figured it out eventually." "Maybe, but it would have taken a lot longer and hurt a lot more." They stood together in the unfinished room, listening to Maya and Sophie laugh somewhere outside. And Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, because life was still hard and messy and full of problems that needed solving. But contentment. The sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 6 months after moving into the farmhouse, still not finished, probably never would be, Victoria and Ethan were in town getting supplies when they ran into Catherine Torres. "Victoria, Ethan, how's the house coming?" "Slowly," Victoria said with a laugh, "but we're getting there. I saw the Foundation's latest impact report. The work you're doing with the domestic violence shelter is remarkable. We're just getting started, but it feels right, like we're actually making a difference instead of just managing an organization." Catherine smiled. "Your mother would be proud. Not of the empire you built, though that was impressive, but of this, the choice to focus on what matters." After Catherine left, Ethan noticed Victoria was quiet. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking about what she said, about my mom being proud." Victoria looked at him. "I spent so long trying to honor her by building something big that I forgot she started the foundation because one family needed help, and she happened to be in a position to give it. It was never about the scale. It was about the impact. You figured it out eventually." "Because I almost lost everything. Kind of a hard way to learn the lesson." Ethan took her hand. "But you learned it. That's what matters." That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria found Ethan on the back porch. "I have a question," she said, sitting beside him. "Okay. Do you think we're always going to be like this, figuring things out as we go, never quite having all the answers?" Ethan thought about that. "Probably. Is that a problem?" "No, it's just different from what I'm used to. I spent my whole life planning, controlling, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. And now I'm just," she gestured vaguely, "living. And it's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know if I'm doing it right." "There is no right. There's just what works for us." Victoria leaned against him. "I love you. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I've really explained what it means. You didn't just love me through the crisis. You loved me into becoming someone who could handle it. Someone who could stand up and fight instead of hiding behind walls and pretending to be perfect. You were always that person. You just needed a reason to let her out." "Maybe. But you were the reason." She lifted her head to look at him. "So thank you. For being stubborn and refusing to give up on me even when I gave you every reason to." Ethan kissed her softly. "Thank you for letting me stay."